Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are taking a look at one of my grail guns that could not fit in frame. Oh, today, at long last, I finally have managed to acquire for myself a PTR 91. What is a PTR 91, you might ask? Why, it is a rifle. A very long rifle. Well, not that long. It's actually a bit shorter than the M1 Garand, but it is indeed a rifle, ladies and gentlemen. It is a rifle patterned after the H&K G3, which was the German Cold War service rifle that was superseded in service by the G36. PTR came on the scene in the early 2000s after the assault weapons ban ensured that the HK91, which was the civilian version of the G3, could no longer be imported. PTR initially started out using surplus parts and a few American-made bits here and there, but by 2020, this entire rifle is American-made. However, with that in mind, there is the GI model that still uses some surplus stocks and handguards. This is a A3S 190 or 100, I forget the exact numerical code, and deciphering PTR numerical codes is not easy. Trying to figure out just what this rifle is compared to the others is not an easy prospect. But as near as I can tell, the A3S just implies that it has, well, doesn't imply, but states that it has a polymer lower and a skinny handguard such as this. H&K's G3 got its start way back in the days of World War II. Essentially, there was a late war design that used what was called roller delayed blowback. It was supposed to be a fairly simple rifle to construct and be very, very reliable, even in the most adverse of conditions. Then many of the designers that worked on that, or at least I think it was the designers that worked on that, ultimately the design would be taken to France, whereupon it wouldn't really go anywhere. Then it would go to Spain, where it would become the Setme rifle. Then Germany wanted to adopt the FNFAL, but Belgium remembered that they were invaded and occupied, not particularly kindly, by the Germans twice in 1 century, so they refused to allow the Germans to manufacture FALs of their own. So the Germans took the Setme design and turned it into what is effectively this. Now, the history of the civilian G3 clones starts with just the G3, which was made semi-auto only and imported into the United States by Sarco, which was actually a company out of California, believe it or not. They would import, I think, a very small number, and then there would be something called the HK41, which was designed for the reservists in Germany, but America, of course, wanted some because we like our guns. That would be imported a little bit, but then that would be cut off due to another firearms restricting law. And then finally, HK would, I think, either build a factory in America or do something to that HK 45 or 40, whichever one it is, or 41, and it would basically become the HK 91. Then that would be restricted, and then finally PTR would come in to stem the tide. One thing that's kind of cool, and this is something that is a very treasured memory of mine, I was actually talking about wanting a G3 in one of my earliest Let's Plays. It was a Let's Play of Rainbow Six Vegas. And I actually had a fan PM me, or DM me, or however, direct message, personal message, whatever, message me saying that, oh yeah, Century Arms imports these. It's the civilianized, demilitarized, he used an interesting way of civilized G3 is what it was called, or is what he called it. I'm glad I didn't have the money back then to buy that, because as we would know now, the Setme rifles that Century imported initially weren't any good. The C308 is supposedly pretty good. All the videos give it a lot of high reviews and things of that nature. I actually considered acquiring one, but I decided to go for the PTR and save up a crap ton of money to get it, because Rainick actually convinced me to get this thing. That's because, while the C308 is good, they are not supposed to be quite as accurate as a legitimate PTR 91. Now, PTR does manufacture the receivers and a few other parts on the Century Arms C308, but this is pure PTR. And so I decided to wait and get this. Now, PTR 91s are well renowned for their accuracy. These are supposed to be like 1 MOA or sub-MOA guns at like 100 yards. There's a 9-hole reviews video of the heavy barrel model, of which this isn't, although figuring out if this is a heavy barrel model or not If you don't know what you're looking at, it's kind of hard. Basically, the heavy barrel model, as we can see, this is a tapered barrel model. The easiest way to tell the difference between a tapered barreled model is this is going to be thick throughout instead of skinnying up a bit here. There's also a number of other differences between the various PTRs. This has the polymer lower. There's also a metal lower version. Really, unless you're doing some real hardcore target shooting, you don't really necessarily need the target model, unless that's something you really want to do. And it's not, if you can find them, they're not supposed to be that much more expensive than something such as this. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, but 9-hole reviews, after all that waffle, was able to take the heavy barrel model out to 800 yards, which is quite impressive to say the least. In short, this more than earns the moniker of PTR, which stands for Precision Target Rifle. So enough waffle, let's take a look at what this gun is. This is a semi-automatic 308/7.62 by 5.1mm rifle that feeds from 20-round magazines. The magazine is actually fairly well made, and these are very, very cheap. And these are the rock and lock design. But here's the thing, it's not like an AK. You can't just rock in like this and then lock back. You kind of have to mess with it a little bit and then lock it back. That is one thing that does take a little bit of getting used to. You have to practice with these because you kind of just insert it like you would a regular mag and then lock back. It's definitely more finicky than one would like, but it makes sense due to the overall design paradigm of this particular rifle. And what you're going to notice when it comes to this rifle is this was designed with all the lessons learned from the Eastern Front of World War II. The Germans had long memories with that. One of the most obvious things that this has is that very wide trigger guard, so you can easily put a gloved finger inside of it and fire it. There's no need for any things to be moved around or anything. It's bigger than the usual trigger guard. The safety on here is also, let's see if we can get that in the frame, very chunky. This rifle is a very chunky boy, to say the least. This is not the most ergonomic safety, but what it is a safety you could use with either numbed fingers or gloved fingers. And then we get into the operating mechanism itself. Roller delayed blowback. There's no gas system to get gummed up if you don't clean it often. There's fewer parts you have to worry about breaking. And once again, it's a bit of a chunky boy in this regard. Let's see if we can get that in the frame. So what we have here is a very interesting way of charging it. There's no gas system. So what you basically have to do is you pull down on this cocking handle, and then you have to, let's see if we can get that in frame there, gorilla it back. I got kind of lucky with that because that was pretty easy. Sometimes it is hard to get back. In fact, see that wound on there is from this boy right here. Once you get it cocked, you then do the HK slap, which is really fun. And then the weapon is ready to go. Now, one of the first upgrades you're going to want to do to this rifle is you are definitely going to want to go on hkparts.net and get the extended padded charging handle. It's about $50, but it's worth it. Now, sights for this firearm are HK styled. You've got a drum and you've got a front sight post. The front sight post is not the easiest to see, but it still is fairly easy to pick up with a little bit of practice. Within 40 rounds, I was able to get pretty good hits, to say the least. Now, you've got a 100-yard battle sight that is a V-notch. You then have apertures out to 400 yards, and according to the PTR instruction manual, it is in yards, not meters, seeing as how this is made for the American civilian shooting market. You then, of course, with this model, have a top-mounted Picatinny rail. Now, the top-mounted Picatinny rail allows you to mount a variety of optics. You're going to need a little bit of a riser because lower profile mounts will not be able to clear the sight. So right now I don't have an optic, but I do intend to pick up a primary arms Cyclops. It's only 1x, but the maximum range I'm shooting this at is 100 yards. And so 1x is more than enough, seeing as how I was able to get really, really good hits with just the 100-yard battle sight. The V-notch that Military Arms channel is not too fond of, I was able to get good hits first time out. Did not have any malfunctions whatsoever, except, and we'll see this in the video footage, the first round on 2 mags did not go off. I have no idea why. Maybe it was 2 bad primers and I got lucky. I don't know. But the very first mag, no problems whatsoever. Fired every one. And as for the second mags, except for the first round, fired every shot there. Now, I do have a sling. This is a surplus G3 sling. It is by far my favorite sling of all time because it's very, very comfortable and very easy to install on the rifle. All you got to do is clip it on the sling mount here and then run it through the stock like the old K98K. Really, the whole rifle I just absolutely love. It's one of those things I've been waiting for well over almost two decades to get this rifle. I never thought I'd be able to get it, but I was able to get it. Even disassembly of this rifle is nothing short of exceptional. You just knock out these 2 pins, stock comes off, the entire trigger housing just comes off as one unit. You pull out the bolt carrier group, and that's it. It was just really quite... It was even easier in some respects than the AK. It's kind of crazy in that concept. Because, like, with this, it is the most idiot-proof thing imaginable. With the AK, you have to have the bolt in just the right way, otherwise it won't actually... you can't reassemble it. Now then, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be shooting 60 shots. Well, I'm going to be shooting 40, and my grandfather is going to be shooting 20. Initially, I was only going to use 60 rounds of steel case Wolf, but my local range had some 308, specifically M80 ball MagTech ammo. So I'm going to be shooting 40 rounds of steel and 20 rounds of brass. Now, I'm only going to be shooting this at 50 yards, seeing as I wanted to see just where this rifle was hitting and if the sights were actually on from the factory. Thankfully, they were. And that's it. I do intend to make another video where I take this out further, either with iron sights or with the primary arm Cyclops. So with all that waffling out of the way, let's take this rifle out. Oh dear, my poor hand. And let's see if we can have... there we go. Some fun. I just smacked myself in the face. 20. Oh, dearie, dearie me, ladies and gentlemen, did we have some fun. Those were some absolutely exceptional hits at 50 yards. Yeah, this rifle could probably go out to 800, I guess, if you have an 800-yard range and have practiced enough. But damn, with that V-notch, ladies and gentlemen, we actually had some shots touching. I find that hard to do with rifles with bloody scopes. Needless to say, the PTR does indeed live up to its reputation. Recoil is very manageable with this rifle's design. While this is .308 and it's definitely far more powerful than .223 or 7.62x39, recoil is on par with 7.62x39 in many respects. It's just a little bit worse than that. Now, one of the things I quite like about this gun, in addition to everything else, is the muzzle device. It definitely keeps down any of the flash, and most importantly, it's not nearly as concussive as 223/556 coming out of an M2 birdcage. One of the things I dislike about the AR-15 is just that concussion of every shot. It's why I don't really shoot mine altogether that much. Now, one of the other aspects of this muzzle device is it's not horrible to be around. As I was filming my grandfather shooting it, I did not get that horrible concussion that you also get when you stand around somebody shooting an AR-15. One of the things that people like to talk about when it comes to this rifle is that it's exceptionally long, and well, it is longer than your traditional AR-15, and it's exceptionally heavy. And while it definitely is heavier than an AR, or in some cases an AK, it's not too bad. It's much more front heavy than your average rifle, but you get used to it. One thing I do find kind of funny, though, is my grandfather is 5'7" and 80 years old as of 2020, and yet he was able to shoot this from the offhand, and he was able to shoot it quite accurately, and he was able to get that bloody charging handle down. So yeah, if you're 50 to 60 years younger than he is, just lift, bro. See, this is where it's hard. Just lift, bro. Maybe I need to lift. But anyway, lifting aside, the PTR 91, ladies and gentlemen, I cannot wait to do the second shots, mainly because I'm kind of smitten with this rifle. I always like to say that every new rifle I get is my favorite rifle, but there's just something about this that's a little bit different. I don't know. With that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, one thing I want to point out about the PTR 91 is that it is definitely a pricey rifle. Or is it, ladies and gentlemen? You get a lot of gun for the price you pay. There's a lot of other firearms that cost about as much as the PTR that, in some respects, aren't quite as good. One thing that is kind of annoying about this particular PTR is the handguard is a little rattly. But there's also firearms that cost more than this that have issues where they jam all the time, or their handguards actually fall off. It's just kind of interesting how PTR was able to make a gun of this quality for relatively low money. So when you can get a decent AR, or a so-called decent AR or decent AK for the same price as this, you know PTR's got to be doing something right. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, I've already gushed about this rifle enough. I cannot wait to do the follow-up video at the 100-yard line. But until then, ladies and gentlemen, I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good HK slap, or whatever makes you happy.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing you this great content.